Hello there. Thanks for tuning into the Grace Narrative today. I'm your host, Lisa Ettinger. I'm honored that you're sharing your time with me. I love how we can explore the role of grace in our sleeping, eating, going to work, walking around lives. It makes a difference if we are going to be encouraged and empowered to embrace God's way in the everyday. You're listening to episode 131, Curating Your Influences. Yeah, I know. I've been thinking a lot lately about the things and the people that influence my life. And the reason I started doing this was because I was experiencing some moods, some attitudes, some feelings, and some reactions that were really upsetting. And frankly, I did not want them. And I couldn't quite put my finger on where they were coming from or what was causing them. It was just this mystery, right? And I like to solve mysteries. I don't know if you knew this or not, but it's just kind of my personality. In fact, I can remember back in the day when I was younger, growing up, I thought it would be the coolest thing to be a detective. So I was all about reading the Nancy Drew mysteries. And then it seemed like there was a time there growing up where all of the shows on TV were about private investigators, and it looked really glamorous. So there's that. But still to this day, I'm always looking to find solutions and figure things out. So it's a thing for me. And it was kind of a rude awakening as I started to delve into this little mystery and realize that I was allowing more influences over my life by default that I was actually consciously choosing. You know, we think that we are only influenced by what we noticeably decide, but you know what? We also give permission to be influenced by whatever it is that we default to. And it's amazing how subtle influences can take over. It's so easy to have that done in today's culture with this unlimited access that we have to people and ideas. And while I'd like to think that most of my influences come from sources that are aligned with my values, I am discovering that there's a deeper level of intention actually that's required if that's going to be the case. So I've looked at it as a process of conscious curation. Now, curation has to do with selecting, organizing, looking after. If you think of it in terms of a museum curation, there's only so much room in the museum. So the exhibits have to be curated. So when I talk about curating my influences, you might associate that with, listen, an easy way would just cull the in list of social media influencers that I follow. I need to be more choosy with my collection of who pops up on my feed. And you'd be right, like that's part of it for sure. Listen, I have a ton of interests, and for every interest, there's an almost infinite number of people with opinions and experiences about those things, an infinite amount of companies that want my attention centered around that interest. And I have so many various Pinterest boards, it's almost embarrassing. I think that what would benefit me the most, though, at this point is if I would just do a bit more digging before I follow someone. Just because there's one or two good ideas that I see from a source, from a person, does not mean that that person or that source is worth following. There needs to be a consistent history of quality stuff, right? So a strategy there would be to do research on their past posts and who or what they associate themselves with before I give my consent to being exposed to everything they say or promote that comes along my feed. Because that's what social media is for. A big thing for me has also been noticing when an influencer that I follow, changes their philosophy or adopts different values that are opposed to the spiritual mindset that I'm trying to cultivate. That seems like a pretty obvious one, right? But sometimes, even being in a new season of life alerts me that I need to change my influences. It could be that someone that I've received wisdom from in the past is no longer providing that anymore. And I find myself in a different place. And so it's time to let them go, to time to unfollow, because I've learned what I can from them. And so their content has become a distraction from my current purpose rather than being a helpful support. And when that happens, like, I can release them without guilt because I'm consciously curating my influences. But it's not only influencers, as in people known by that title, that we need to be aware of and be discerning about, right? Environment is another influence on our wellness. It's deciding what I'm going to surround myself with that's going to help me think clearly. Not all of the environments we find ourselves in are created equal, you know. I have switched jobs before because mentally I needed a healthier environment. I've learned to put a lot of care into the atmosphere of my home so that it's a place that serves my family, their whole person, body, mind, and spirit, in whatever stage of life they're in. Another influence that is worth curating carefully is our entertainment. Yeah, there are some forms of entertainment that I find so enjoyable and restorative, and other forms that lead me to negative comparison and steal my joy. Even having certain channels or videos in the background can affect my mindset and mood, you guys. It's crazy how susceptible I am to that. So that's something that I have to watch out for. Also, another influence is being mindful of how I get my news. That's another way for me to curate. I mentioned before that one thing is really helping me that I've been doing for a while now is subscribing to the Pour Over as my primary news source. I bet you right now can think of folks that constantly listen to news channels or have notifications on their phone from a news stream that's popping up continually about crisis after crisis all across the world. And then they wonder why they feel so hopeless about everything. And they're so negative all the time. It's an influence. And I may not have that influence per se, but I'm that way about other things. That's just an example of how we default to and what is easily acceptable to us, how that contributes to our thought patterns, to our attitudes, to our feelings, to our reaction, and why it is so important that we consciously curate those influences. I believe that it is an act of the grace of God that He shows us what is having a negative impact on us and what has a positive impact on us. Remember, among other things, God's grace is His action in our lives. And so, of course, the Holy Spirit is going to help us be discerning. That's part of His acts that He does in our lives. Discernment and the wisdom of God go together. Like it says in John 3:17, the wisdom from above is first pure, and then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. As a Christ follower, that's what we hope we're influenced by, right? Okay, what's a good analogy here? Let's think of a good analogy here. It's like if you decide you want to be more organized, the first step is not buying cute baskets from Home Goods. I know, bummer, right? But the first step is actually decluttering what you don't need, because we all have this overabundance of stuff that stands in the way to be organized. And the next step after decluttering is having a system in place, still not baskets. It's having a system in place that where everything has a spot to belong. so that the first place you look for it is where you find it, regardless of whether it's in a cute container or not. So let's compare that to how we curate our influences. First, we have to rid ourselves of influences that are not concerned with the wisdom of God. And the Bible is full of exhortation and instruction about this. Just listen to this phrase from Romans 12 in the J.B. Phillips translation. Don't let the world around you squeeze you into its mold. Yeah, I like that. In other words, declutter your influences that aren't based in the wisdom of God. And then you have room for intentionally curating the good influences. Again, the Bible has instruction on this. Philippians 4:8. Whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, lovely, admirable, think about those things. This whole process is the renewal of our minds that leads to transformation. If you keep reading in Romans 12, you're going to find it later on in that chapter. Christ being formed in us is not going to happen by accident. That's guaranteed. But by the grace of God, we can lay hold on his wisdom and trust him for discernment in the renewal and transformation process that he has committed to complete in us. I mean, that's just an encouraging word for everybody. I always extend the invitation to follow me on Instagram at Lisa K. Ettinger before we close out the episode, and to subscribe to The Grace Narrative wherever you like to listen to podcasts. You know, if you prefer videos, I've begun recording episodes that you can watch on my YouTube channel, starting with episode 129 is where I started doing that. You just type in Lisa Ettinger at The Grace Narrative in the search bar and you'll find it. LisaEdinger at The Grace Narrative. Feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel as well. I hope that this episode has encouraged you to be thankful for the grace that enables us to consciously curate our influences as you embrace God's way in your everyday.